Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Richards, Technical Services Manager of the Managing General Agents Association, and on behalf of the MGAA, I'd like to welcome you to our briefing this afternoon. This is being delivered by Go-Insur from Pancentric Digital with Diary of an MGA CEO. Just like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and camera are turned off unless contributing. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Time allowing, these questions will be asked and answered at the end of the event. If we run out of time, questions will be answered post-event. This presentation is accredited for CPD hours if relevant to your ongoing professional development programme. There are polls used in this session, just to confirm that these are anonymous. This briefing is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be issued post-event together with the slides and our feedback survey. Please take the time to complete our survey. It will take no longer than 2 minutes and allows us to continue to deliver the best possible future events to our members. So as a recap, today's briefing is Diary of an MGA CEO delivered by Go-Insur from Pancentric Digital. So without further wait, let me pass you across to Simon Fenn to tell you more and introduce the presenters while I start the slides. So Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Just some quick introductions then. I'm Simon Fenn, Director at Pancentric and Go-Insur. I'll be running this Diary of a CEO, MGA style, today, asking the questions. I'm 30 years into a career focused mainly on marketing, service design, majoring on the digital change side of things and software development from the early 2000s. I lead Pancentric's consulting operation, and the commercial development of our SaaS portfolio includes the Go-Insur solution, the MGA policy admin solution. Main man of the day, cuddled up with on your screen with the other chap, is Mike Fenton, who's CEO of Laris, Director of Laris. Some of you on the call might know Mike, but Mike was previously MD at Folgate Underwriting Agency. I guess that was in the late 80s. And then MD of Personal Motor at Towergate for 14 years. In the time that Mike was at Towergate, I think he grew the motor book from 0 to an impressive 30 million plus, before then leaving to launch Tanzar Holdings in 2016. And then Laris then came next, which we'll talk about more in a moment. And then also on the call next to Mike there is Steve Newton. He's colleague and CTO at Go-Insur. And anything you want to know about insurance and technology, Steve is quite definitely your man. He's got extensive experience running IT business analysis functions in leading insurers and brands, Ardonna, Fusion, Towergate, Insurance for Car Hire, NFU Mutual, among the many. Steve switched to the vendor side in 2014 and now leads the development strategy at Go-Insur. So just next slide, please, in COVID style. So yeah, Laris, headlines quickly on Laris. Obviously, we could talk about it more. Mike set up this MGA, specialty MGA, in the midst of COVID, just for the extra challenge, I guess, leveraging his 35 years plus experience in personal lines. It specializes in non-standard household products, so unoccupied, holiday homes, etc. If you want a next slide, please, Tim. Yeah, so today Mike's about 3 years in now of trading with Laris, so we're going to look back at the challenges setting up, particularly on the distribution side, but also we'll touch on other areas too, and then also look forward to the way the market perhaps will look in a few years' time and what new pressures and opportunities that's going to offer everyone. Just to tick, if you could just one more slide with me, Tim. Yeah, just to tick the CPD boxes and just to sort of clarify what is going to be gained from this session. Certainly, you should be able to explain some of the business constraints and opportunities for the different distribution channels, outline the steps, lead times, resource requirements for setting up distribution via the broker software houses and direct to broker, and explain the realities and best approaches to getting broker engagement and adoption. And then, yeah, the future of distribution, look at the role of the expanding role of third-party brands as well. So yeah, that's what we are endeavouring to cover on this session today. Next slide. So yes, so welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining us today. I can't actually see you now on screen. There you are. So cast your mind back to 2018-ish, I suppose it was. You were soon to be, I don't know, 60, late 50s perhaps, and you decided you decided to start an MGA. What on earth possessed you to do that at that
I think, yeah, I think simply because of my background, I knew that there was still work to do. I wasn't ready to hang up the boots, and certainly from sort of working through the Towergate years and into Tanzar, I knew that there was still a gap in the market, and a gap that was actually increasing in size in terms of household, and also there was separate challenges on motor, which I'll go into as to why we didn't, as a startup anyway, look at pursuing that. And it was, yes, 2020, in the midst of the whole COVID pandemic, lockdowns and things like that. Life was difficult. It was difficult to get hold of people. Agreements were made, but we all know so many people went home. There was a lot of BAU going on, and not a lot of progress, certainly for new business. So that sort of a little bit put us out because we had the opportunity, but we couldn't follow up as quickly as we wanted to. But it was something that it was definitely, we could see during that period, more and more need to add to the market offerings that were out there. Nothing was moving, no new real developments. So yes, it was a challenging time, and it did turn up at the wrong point, but worthwhile in the end. Yes.
Yeah. And household, I mean, your background was more motor, but household was there were obvious gaps there. You felt.
Yeah, well, my background's personal lines, and going back to I was personal lines director for Go-Insur Insurance Company back in the 90s, so not quite the late 80s, not quite that old time.
Sorry.
Sorry, but we at Folgate we had a very large property presence, household presence. We had some very big schemes. We were the largest on the AA panel. We were the sole supplier for a number of years to Saga, which is an enormous book in its own right. But motor was very much a part of our sort of DNA as well, because we were almost pioneers to a degree, certainly on the full cycle side of EDI in the mid 90s. So it was a good mix of the two. So the challenge was, as always is the case, what do you kick off with? And I think because of where we were generally as a country in terms of lockdown and things like that, what was happening with motor, what wasn't so clear, certainly to myself and my colleague who set up Larry's, was whether it was the right time with few cars on the roads. There were some insurers that were putting premium down, thinking it's a great time to make hay while the sun was shining, because clearly it's more difficult to have an accident when you're at home. I think that was a line that I came out with at the time, but certainly was repeated by a member of the ABI yesterday in front of a Treasury Select Committee in Parliament, where we talk about extortionate rises. And of course, what we've seen since with motor is that erratic and sort of roller coaster situation, whereby what was seen as an opportunity and to put volume on, and now trying to retain that volume, and as a consequence, making a situation of worse profitability overall as a class of business, which is why the ABI representative was pulled into Parliament yesterday to explain extortionate price increases. So not that we had the crystal ball and we could see clearly, but it was just one of those concerns. And in comparison with household, because of our background, or particularly my background, was a lot easier to sort of deal with, because the changes that you would have seen during the COVID period. I mean, great for things like escape of water, because more people at home and turn the stopcock off when they realised that it was flooding, as opposed to where they've been out at work and things like that. But it was just a more natural sort of start point, I think, for us. Mm-hmm. It's not a never say never situation, or is a never say never situation, I suppose, in regards to motor, but certainly there's a lot to settle down, and as a startup, it's not still, in my view, the right time to move on with motor. I think there's a lot of changes still to come through. So so that's why, of the two options, the fork in the road, which one first? Definitely household. So
yeah, and very much in the specialty space within household.
yeah, because the one thing that was, again, it was a period where, if you were looking at what was happening in the market, the new levels of technology control with IHP, insurer hosted pricing moving in, you could see where insurers were more and more geared to do everything automatically, and more direct control in terms of speed of change and things like that, whether it be criteria, rating, whatever. But they were leaving behind the sort of cases that needed some eyeballing, needed some attention, needed a product that was specifically, built for that particular market. And when we're talking about, sort of something more niche, it can just be a slight off vanilla. Things like you mentioned, one of the products that we write at Lowry's is unoccupied. It's a standard type of offering in relation to an unoccupied market, but it's not there easily done on an IHP basis. So we could see that was a gap that was widening. Certainly things like the rental market. I mean, we all saw and continue to see the changes in home ownership, the way that values of houses went up through the teens in particular. Not a great deal of wage increases. People find it more and more difficult with the regulatory situation in terms of expectations on deposits and things like that. So we can see that the rental market would expand. So again, other areas that, again, non-vanilla, non-standard in comparison with what the
and capacity wise, I mean, that was sort of well received. And you was it, how straightforward or otherwise was it capacity wise?
It's difficult to have conversations when people aren't in the office, but thankfully before COVID kicked in good and proper, we'd agreed in principle with I'll name it AXA in terms of getting the first of the products off the ground. So kept the conversations going, and yes, there was and is to a degree still plenty of interest, but obviously because of the expected due diligence now with the additional governance and regulatory conditions that are in place, the onboarding time is a lot longer. So that is definitely a period that's moved out. So there's a lot of work to
and we're going to talk about sort of resources and what's involved in getting mobilized, but funding wise, you had some sense that of what you needed, and did you go and get external funding? Or
so we have other shareholders in the business, where some some working capital was added, as well as obviously sort of general capital, but yeah, it was something that we did ourselves. We believed in it enough to use our own funding. We know that that's a restriction. We've since had other shareholders come on board, so that's allowed us to progress. But we're very clear in our own minds that it was one step at a time, because of the costs of putting products out there, the costs of building bespoke offerings specific to the more niche markets that we wanted to offer products in. So yes, it was not go and remortgage the house completely, but there was
largely self-funded through the sort of shareholder kind of interest. Okay. Very briefly, just on compliance and governance, I mean, anything surprise you in terms of what you were faced with to get that covered off? We haven't got long.
So from the point of view of having sort of been through this previously in terms of getting authorised, getting the entity authorised and things like that, the one thing that we've learned, particularly when you're a startup and there's only a few heads, is to make good use of those who are specialists in the field. So you don't have to bring everything in-house, and we used a very good external third-party consultancy company used by many brokers in particular, and a number of other MGAs to help us through that journey. Yes, it's it is a difficult journey, and particularly if you're coming in as a startup. But I think that, as always, look for those who are specialists in that field, horses for courses and all that, and that helps massively.
Yeah. So don't try and do that a bit yourself.
Not unless you've got a complete background in compliance and all that. I'm sure a number of people on this call will have, and they'll relate to the extent of rules and regulations that now are, and the boxes we need to tick. So
sure. Yeah, Tim, next slide, please. So the distribution, got all those challenges. Building the book, of course, is the acid test. You've been there and done it. What was your view of what channels you were going to kind of explore as a priority?
So I think we all know that in the industry where there's an obligation almost to sort of look at what's been traditionally or certainly in recent times, last couple of decades or so, the areas where you distribute. So software houses are a key part of that distribution mechanism. So obviously we've a number of mainstream software houses in the UK that host household style products. So the start point was very much a case of, okay, what have we got? What's there? What can we best use? So profiling the brokers, mainly that we knew from prior lives, in terms of provided A, volume, or B, the speciality and the skills and knowledge. But then also looking at complementing not only that distribution chain via the mainstream software houses, but complementing with something that would be more bespoke, more tailored to the actual products that we wanted to offer. As a typical example, software houses will have often a household module or shell products, but if you're trying to put something specialist in it, it's a case of working with what's available. Sometimes that's easy, and for some of our products it was more straightforward. The others that we have in mind and had in mind, it would be a case of doing something more bespoke. That's really to serve those who are specialists in their own field, for looking at niche market offerings. So start point was very much a case of which software houses. We had two into one, on the basis of OpenGI boards, TGSL. So that was a one hit, and we'd had a lot of experience with the guys and girls at OpenGI previously. So that was a natural start point. But what we wanted to do also from day one was to ensure that we had that complementary offering as well, so that we go that little bit further and be a bit more niche as well. So that was.
And so your goal was to have both sort of live and in market at the same.
Absolutely. So the as is always the case, probably more so in the commercial lines market with extranets and the likes, we wanted something that we could actually give to a broker and say, right, there we are. This is what we've got. This is how you access it. We would be the authors of the question set. So we'd have the architecture built to our wantings, as opposed to sort of having to deal with the main software houses and theirs. But again, it's a complementary thing. It's very much a case if we can do that, and then we're not so reliant on that broker having that particular software house. We know that we can only do those one at a time, because it's cost inhibitive at the outset. So, but it was key for us to actually have that portal offering, and ideally one that was directly linked to our back office, so integrated, so we had control over that and had the ability to adapt it as well. Because the one thing we were very keen on doing was working closely with some of the specialist brokers. So if their feedback suggested, we could approach it this way as opposed to that way, then we took on board. And thankfully, because of what we did do with the Go-Insur side, we're able to change it as we needed to. It's an evolving, sort of situation even now. So it's
I mean, maybe sensitive details, but what very broadly split in terms of your revenues by those two sort of predominant channels.
So it's pretty much down the middle now, in terms of those specialist ones who are looking at something that is absolutely spot on. That's their market. That's what they market as well. To get the clients. Something like what we've got there, whether it be the software house or via our own portal, is sufficient. But we do see pretty much a split. I'm sure that with time, where we go live with more software houses, the software houses will probably take the bulk of it.
The bulk should be,
yeah. But I mean, at the moment, because we're only live on the two, others are in the pipeline. But It's like business case first, and then money available, yes, and then we move on. But also obviously lead times, which I know we're going to talk about at some point. So it's the having the offering alongside that's our own and under our own control is allows us to deploy to a lot more brokers a lot quicker.
I think Tim, you're just going to interject with a quick poll just before we move on to. Thanks, Mike. So hopefully you'll see something come up on screen in a second, which will allow you to vote or respond. Yeah, so what experience do you have getting products implemented into broker software houses? It'd be interesting just to see what people's direct experience of that is, just before we move into talking that through. So please vote now. I think it'll take a few seconds, but is it Tim or Jenna? Just let us know when.
Yeah, it's coming up now to 45 seconds. So if you're happy, Simon, I'll end it there.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. So yeah, what the survey says is that the poll says that a good 70% of people haven't any direct experience of trying to implement a product into broker software houses, but 25% have some, and 4% have lots. So there's some experience in the room there. But if we could just close that poll off now and then carry on. If next slide, please, Tim. So yeah, just I'd like to welcome Steve into the Steve Newton, who's colleague and CTO of Go-Insur, very much the technology side of things. Just going to have a chat with Steve now about approaching the software houses and the realities of how that works. So Steve, welcome. Just before we go into I think we're going to as quickly as possible step through the stages of getting something live, but just in very broad terms, planning wise and thinking about delivery, if someone was looking at this for the first time, what sort of time frame are we looking at in terms of getting a product live from a starting point?
Yeah, so from a starting point, obviously things change, but typically you're looking at about 3 to 6 months. But that really does depend on what you have infrastructure-wise already. So if you've already got some interaction with the software houses, obviously that makes it quicker. If you've got large teams of people and you're working in an organization that has lots of people doing specific roles, again, that makes it a lot easier. You've got a lot more resource available. That makes it quicker. If you're, again, going back to the poll, if you're in a position whereby you're maybe a founder, you've got a couple of members of staff, they haven't got that experience, obviously that's going to take a lot longer. You need to build that in. You need to be, realistic about it, really. So, ultimately, you've got the element of building the product, but you've got to understand, the strategy around that, what the market is, capacity, where are you going to get it from? Have you already got it? There's all of these things that have to be working either in parallel, or some of them need to be done up front, either in principle or ready to go to then move forwards. Because what you also don't want to do is to have that cost, move it forwards, and then actually, we haven't got capacity. So we've got a product built based on our design, if you're allowed to do, or if you can do that, or maybe there's going to be changes coming through because you've built it on one premise, but actually to get the capacity and get it into play, you need to change that. So it does vary, but I think, a typical build, I think 3 to 6 months is probably a fair assessment. Some will be quicker, some will be slower. And I think it's just really being, quite honest with yourself, really, about what your expertise is, but also whether you can buy that in. There are lots of specialists in the market, a bit like we talked about compliance earlier on. There are specialists who have done this day in, day out for many years. That's maybe something where you need to lean on that. And obviously, it's more cost, but also that might get you a better result.
And not much hand holding that the software houses do. You really do need that sort of skill on your side to.
I wouldn't say that. I think the software houses have project teams that are, that again, this is what they do. That's their job. They've got teams of people. They're experts in what they're doing with their particular platform. So again, there's different platforms. They all work different ways. But again, in terms of actually kind of aiding you to get through that process and understanding what you need to provide at what date, that's part of what they're going to do to hand, you're going to have a project manager on the other side who's, again, good and a bad thing is that one, they're going to set you to dates and you've got to hit dates and you've got drop dead dates. And in some cases, there will be a release target that they're working back from. If you miss that because you're working off the side of your desk because you've got to do referrals in the middle because you're an underwriter, or you've got a day job to do and you've got to go off and get business and you've got to get capacity and you've got to get X, Y, Z. Again, that may slow things down. If you miss those deadlines, they're gone. You've got to aim for the next one, which again, it's just trying to understand that it's not a, if you haven't done this before and you haven't got experience in it, you are learning as you're going. You are going to make mistakes. It's undoubtedly you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to find out, oh, I've got to do X. I don't even know how to do X, or I don't know how to get that, or I need to go away and spend the next 3 days working on that to get to that result. So again, it's, you've got resources within the industry to aid in that. But again, depending on your organization, what you're trying to do, you might be an aspiring underwriter now looking to start up and do something game changing. This might be a route that you need to go down, but you might not know how to do that. So again, you can either recruit that staff in, or you can go down the road of consultancy and etc., or finding your way yourself. But there's help at either side. There's help on the software houses side. You may have somebody internal who knows what they're doing, or has IT background, underwriting background. There's various facets, but yeah, it's just trying to find that happy medium for you.
Do you want to just sort of step through just briefly the stages then, and we can maybe just touch on commercials afterwards?
Yeah, sure. So broadly, I'm trying to kind of broken it down in the slides there around what to think about. And the selection's quite different to your typical kind of systems selection. So it's really about distribution. So, ultimately the brokers have selected that particular software house for their reason. So that might be access to product, it might be the functionality, it might be operational. There's many things in there that they've selected it for. So you're not thinking about how it works necessarily. So the day-to-day operational of how the broker works is outside of your scope. So it's very much around, if you select a certain software house, they will have brokers within a certain demographic. Is that your demographic? Is it personal lines? Is it commercial lines that you're trying to do? Is it a mixture of both? So, as Mike alluded to earlier on, there is a cost to play in this. There's ongoing maintenance, there's a cost to play, there's an opportunity cost. If you're working in a larger organization, boss says, I've got to get them on every software house. That is obviously a lot of effort. And there are different ways to aid that by doing it in a different way to consolidate efforts and not to sort of double up on the same kind of product builds. But the flip of that is that then you've really got to think hard about where you're going to get your return on investment. It's very easy to spend money in this day and age. You can spend, there's all sorts of technology players out there where you can throw money at things. But actually, if you spend a whole heap of money, but actually you've selected the wrong partner, they don't have the right brokers for you. You're trying to sell personal lines, and actually their audience is largely commercial lines. Yeah, you're going to struggle to get your
very much the market focus, and be pretty selective from that point of view. And then product design wise.
Yeah, product design, I think it's trying to look at there's a framework for that. So the open market products, Mike talked about earlier on, open market products versus your specialist type of products. The product set and the question set is largely set for personal lines, at least anyway. So therefore you can work towards that. So from a product design point of view, if you were going to a more specialist and portal approach where you want to ask one question and get a quote, that's very different product design to what you would do if you're going to the software houses and you're fitting into a template. It's really good to speed to market because the template's the template with, there are some caveats. There's changes that there's extensions of that. But from a point of view of the questions, what those are. They'll be provided by the software house, and you've got to build a product around it. So it's almost rather than a blank bit of paper and then let's design the product. It's knowing what your distribution is to then say, I'm going to get the product right for that distribution. So again, that's got to, there's different, underwriters on the call will know, go off onto a spreadsheet at lunchtime, put my calc together. Here you go, wham, I've got something that quotes. It's wider than that because it's also about how you market it. It's about how you're going to roll that out. It's about the ongoing maintenance, everything else. So there's different facets to it, but it is very much about understanding that distribution channel, how you're going to get it out there, and then speed to build.
Right.
And then the resourcing and managing, again, there's different people in the audience now where some will work for larger companies. They'll have dedicated project managers, dedicated business analysts, underwriters who their job is to develop this product and roll it out. There's others whereby it might be, 2 people and they're cobbling together various roles, and one's a little bit more technical, one's a bit more underwriting. You may be getting assistance from third parties. You might be driven by the capacity provider in some cases. So it's not to say that you can't do it in any of those scenarios. You absolutely can. You can be very, agile, very thin on kind of resource in terms of not having a team of 10 people. Obviously, if you do have those teams, you are in a larger organization, you might even have the infrastructure already there, in which case you're building on something that bedrock that's been put in place aids everything. It speeds things up. If you're a new starter,
Steve, in the case of Laris, it was a very tight team, really, was it?
It was, yeah. So there's different skill sets, and then there's the experience of understanding what is required for that. So it's not like a startup where it's a, hello software house, what would you like us to provide? That was already known. So from a point of view from a Laris perspective, it was, there's the product, it's there, capacity's in play, let's go. And then changing that to a portal offering and specialist. So slightly different. So again, with having that background, it speeds things up. There's no doubt about it. That's a case. For those of you who are kind of, aspiring and want to move into that space and, it's your first time trying to do it, that will be a little bit more taxing. You need to give yourself more time to understand what that product design needs to look like and how that moves forward. And the same with the distribution. From a distribution point of view, you've built your product, you've got your capacity, you're live, fantastic. But if your selection criteria at the beginning was wrong and you go out and say, right, we're live, and actually it's largely commercial focused and you're a personal lines product, well, you're not going to sell too much, or maybe not, or you might struggle to hit your targets. But likewise, you might be saying, well, I've got the best product in the world, it's got the best rates, it's amazing, but nobody knows about it. So again, the software houses will help you. They've got marketing departments which will push that out and promote it. But there's nothing, you can't get away from the fact that you're going to have to rely on your relationships. You're going to have to be knocking on doors. You're going to have to be promoting it. It's not like, you can't say, I'm going to build it and everybody will come. There's an element of that being available via the software houses through comparative quotes and highlighting it from there. But again, it's not, there's no silver bullet. It's another distribution channel which improves your business and can grow it in a different way, in a different space. But it's not as if it's just switch it on and everything's fantastic and everything's rosy. You've got to work at it like anything. Doesn't matter.
There's quite a lot of work off platform, and yeah.
Absolutely.
If we have time, we'll touch on that later. And then finally, maintenance. Yeah.
Yeah, the maintenance is just making sure you don't forget the obvious. It's you've built it, you've got it, that's fantastic. You have to update rates. You're going to have meetings with a carrier and they're going to tell you things that you need to do, or you're going to have to put plans together, or you're going to have to change the product because it actually isn't selling as well as you think it is, or broker feedback comes in and they go, well, actually, that's great, but it doesn't quite fit this scenario, or this postcode's particularly out. I can't, I'm a regional broker and I'm concentrating on X. So I think that it's a bit of a feedback loop. It's not, and so again, certain management might be saying, well, you've got the product now, I've given you the money, where's the results? But the reality is there's got to be continual feedback, and there's a cost to that. There's a cost to keep the lights on, and there's license costs to pay for. You're going to change the product. You're not going to go live with a product and leave it there for the next 10 years, sitting there bubbling away. So there's got to be a budget up front for maintenance, for rate changes. Now, depending on how you do that, that might be included as part of an arrangement. It may be self-serve. It may be that you have to go to the software houses and ask them to change it. Again, there's lots of these offerings available, and obviously different software providers do it different ways. But again, you've got to build that in. That's a team member. That's not something that somebody's doing on the side of their desk on a Friday afternoon. Oh, I'll just do a little bit. To get this channel working, you have to look after it and nurture it.
Yeah. And very quickly in a nutshell, then commercially, there's the setup costs, and then there's the running costs. Just can you just briefly what's that look like?
So I guess you've got the obvious one is the capex cost around the software build. So again, right. Without the software build, you don't have anything on those platforms, and therefore you've got nothing to sell.
And when you say software build, you mean configure the product on the software house platform?
Correct. Yeah. The product deployment. So not about functionality and everything else, because that's not a concern for you when you're deploying to a broking platform. But not to be forgotten about, you've got on costs. So you've got infrastructure costs to take the data from them. You've got, there's IT costs, there's data costs, there's storage, there's transactional fees, perhaps depending on, again, different models out there. But if there's transactional fees, have you budgeted for those? So again, every transaction going through, you may have a cost associated with it.
How transparent are the software houses when you first kind of speak with them? Is it obvious what all these costs are going to be, or is it something that gets, seeped out over the onboarding process?
It is. I think the things that tend to get forgotten about are the back office IT things. The people that just make it work. There's costs associated with that. So, if you're doing EDI transmissions, you will need a mailbox. The software houses will call that out. It'll be in the project plan. But there is a cost to a mailbox. There is a cost of getting that data to your back office platform to process. There's a cost of overhead in terms of maintaining that data. And IT's IT. It's very close to my heart, but it goes wrong. It breaks. Whether it's intentional or whether it's kind of it's like one of those things where you're scratching your head wondering why it's gone wrong. Mm-hmm. It does happen. So you need to have resources in place to be able to do that. So it goes back to that. It's not a case of turn it on, forget about it, and everything's going to be lovely. The bank account's just going to go up. There's relationships, there's distribution, there's IT. And again, it's a very different space depending on who you are and how many, if you're a larger player, there's people that's job is to maintain that IT software piece, liaise with them and deal with them. And likewise, the capacity provision is completely different. It's another person. If you're in a smaller position, you're a startup, pretty much it's probably on you, and your skill set will be a thing or a number of things, but your specialism will typically be one or two things. And you might need some more help with that. So again, it's just being honest about it. And if it's something that you're not comfortable with, be it compliance, be it IT, that there are people out there that can help. But again, that's got to be built into the business plan of, they all come at a cost. It doesn't matter how you do it.
And very, very, how many 5 figures to get up and running, and excluding the running costs?
Yeah, so I think it depends how you look. Obviously, it depends how much you roll it out. If you roll out day one 10 products, obviously that's going to cost more. But typically you're looking at a 5-figure number. But you've got to remember that it's not just about deploying it for distribution. That's one thing. You've also got to have, where is it going to come into? Is it going to be a bordereau feed? Is it going to be EDI messages coming in? That's got to be processed somewhere. So therefore you have almost not a doubling up, but you have to have somewhere that processes that information to say that you've done X that month.
Right. Yep.
So again, it's, there's lots of examples out there. It could be 5 figures if you go slowly but surely. Equally, you could quite easily make it a larger project, and it could be 6 figures very easily.
Fine. Okay. Tim, do you mind advancing the slides? Quick further poll, maybe just do 30 seconds on this because I'm conscious of the time. So yeah, just looking now at the broker portal side, just be great to know what experience you have out there on the call in terms of selling products directly to brokers via a broker portal, in terms of setup and delivering that.
About another 10 seconds. Happy to end it there, Simon?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So again, similar sort of split, maybe a bit more experience on this one. So 53% have no experience, 33% have some, and 13% have lots. So thanks for that. So yeah, thanks, Steve. Coming back to Mike. I'm conscious of time, so we probably need to keep it semi-pacey. Just in terms of, we talked about software houses and those marketplaces. If you're going to go direct to brokers and offering something a little bit more specialty, I suppose, less vanilla, then the portals offer that option. Mike, do you want to just dip into these areas? I guess these are all the sort of benefits of doing this, but do you want to just headline there?
I mean, I think you can put it into two camps. You've got software houses who will give you that immediate distribution option. They won't necessarily be the ideal answer for those who are truly specialising as distributors. But in terms of volume of brokers, and if they do a whole range, a good breadth of personalised products, perhaps even good breadth of household related products, the software house is a big chunk of that business that you're going to see. But you know where you are. You know that they have a generic question set that's been developed over the years to accommodate all within a particular class, all types of products. So you build your product and you produce your specification based on that question set. So it is a case of that's what it looks like. You need to fit within it, and that's perfect. In many regards. For the true specialists, if they want, something that's a bit more bespoke, which they do, as we know, because as we say, we do a big chunk of our business via the portal. Then we have more of the, sort of clean piece of paper to start speccing down what we want, and then a little bit of referral to those brokers and say, well, what do they want, and try and accommodate, and then also allow it to evolve. So you've got much more control, whether it be the question set, whether it be the criteria, whether you might choose, for example, to have statements more so than questions around declarations. So you can run through declarations, assumptions that this is the basis of what we're writing. I mean, this is all reflected then on statement of facts when you produce your documentation. So it's all there, very clear. But the speed in for a particular type of niche products of getting the quotes can be improved on than when you've got a generic question set to work with. So that's where I think it's seen as an advantage for those who truly do specialise. So products in terms of that, the speed of changes. We work on an IHP style basis with MGI, so we have a pretty good turnaround, and they're pretty good on that front. We don't have the full-blown IHP version that a lot of insurers do on the more standard business. But what we do have, of course, with the portal is control over our products and our rating and our criteria, so we can make changes immediately. So if something is very evident in the morning, by the afternoon, assuming that Steve is around, and we can sort of make it very clear what we want very quickly, and he's available and his workload's not elsewhere, we can actually put those changes through. So there's a lot more real-time opportunity to control it. So those are the two ways that you come up with a product. One to fit what's available and what's already set, and one which is that blank piece of paper where you've got the opportunity to do what you want, which is what we've done. And as I said right at the outset, they do sort of complement each other. We have the speed on both fronts, but obviously when you're controlling your own, it's always going to be that little bit quicker. And that is all control as well. That's not just speed. That's just actual control to put things in, because there are lead times with software houses. There are things that get in the way of a speedy return by a software house. I mean, simple things around new FCA rulings. Change of IPT would be an obvious one, where all of a sudden the workload's just gone because there's so many products that need to change something just as simple as IPT rate or whatever. But yeah, so it is a case of what is your distribution, which way are you looking, adapt accordingly. Yeah, but they're complementary to each other.
And I think we'll touch on the sort of broker relationships in a second. Maybe just if we have the next slide, and then Steve can just explain a tiny bit more, just in terms of that product flexibility, sort of how that works not technically, but kind of sort of light technically, how you get that achieve that flexibility on I guess most systems, but I mean in this case it's Go-Insur.
Yeah, at a very high level, it's about not kind of reinventing the wheel. So in the same way that the software houses have standardized question sets, that makes it quick to market, it makes it very good for comparative quotes, that kind of thing. The idea here is that you can change and do variations on a theme. So your master question set may be class-based, so it could be household. But then scheme 1 is unoccupied, which is a reduced subset of those questions. Scheme 2 could be standard household. Scheme 4 could be some specialist area. So it could be thatched or underpinned or something like that. So the inference is that you're building the overarching framework once, and then those little niches whereby it needs to be white labeled for an affinity play. It needs to be an affiliate and it needs to be dual branded. It needs to be done in a certain way for a certain broker because they get different commission levels or different commercials or a different look and feel because it's linked to some important partner. All of those things shouldn't be a reinvent the wheel. Let's start again. Let's have an answer in 3 weeks. It should be a configurable piece to say, actually, it's actually this set of questions from the master, and then present it in it looks completely different to the end user, but from a technical perspective, it's just a play and a theme. That's really the inference of it. Speed to market.
Yeah. Next slide. So I think, well, Mike, I guess you knew of us sort of independently and had, I think, worked with Steve in a previous life as well. So maybe you had some advantage, at least culturally, you had some sort of track record there. But I mean, if you were in the shoes of someone looking at a vendor selection, because that's a kind of pretty essential thing, whether you're doing software houses with the brokers, marketplaces or not, what sort of things sort of would keep you awake at night in terms of choice? I mean, what was important to you, I suppose?
It was very much a case of, you know exactly where you are with the mainstream software houses, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
Covered off on numerous occasions this morning. It's lunchtime. But in terms of being able to really offer something to a broker that is different and easy for them to use, convenient for them to use, it actually ticks all the boxes of what they want in the ideal world. And to do that, you have to sort of think, right, okay, so we need something that's available. But it's got to also be written and produced by someone who knows the market. That was a serious advantage, because obviously knowing Steve and having sort of worked with him previously, and also knowing how the Go-Insur and how flexible and versatile it was, the Go-Insur system. So on that basis, it was quite an easy sort of choice for us. We'd seen how it worked elsewhere, where it had been built, specifically in a motor scenario, in a marine scenario. We could see what worked well, and you could see that it was very niche, and therefore, what we wanted was not actually probably as complex as that. So it was quite an easy decision. But yeah, I mean, it as always is the case, whether it's distribution, knowing the brokers, in the case of in this particular instance, knowing what was available, the people involved with it, and knowing that they could deliver what we wanted, or certainly expecting that, and thankfully it has been the experience. And we've got headers in there, bullets there, round controls and things like that, and customization. This is, and as Steve just talked from the last slide, these are all things that are available, were available, and we're making use of now, and we will make even more use of as we bring new products on board.
Cool. Do you want to just, I think this next slide, just briefly, it's just really just to say, from the Go-Insur perspective, that we do actually have checklists and some other sort of information that could be useful to anyone looking to do this. So, which is all freely available. We can, perhaps through Tim, I guess we could share that after this session. So, next slide. Hopefully coming.
Sorry, I'm just trying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to change it.
That's all right.
Strangely, it doesn't seem to want to change. Oh, there we go.
So yeah, I guess in the last couple of years or more, we must have spoken to, I mean, all sizes of organisation, but plenty of startups. And I think typically our advice is keep it simple, prove the model, and then scale from there. But Steve, I mean, I guess from a Laris point of view, we had a fairly seasoned professional insurance person who didn't have too many illusions about what to expect in terms of market development. But what sort of key things do you think does a vendor need to? I mean, if you were in Mike's shoes as a less seasoned person, what sort of things does he need to be saying to vendors when first approaching them?
I think it's have an understanding of what you want to achieve. So, don't get too hung up on the technology end of it. Don't walk in there with, I want AI to do X. It's going back a level. What is it that you want to do? What's the distribution? Is it a specialist product? Is it more akin to a software house distribution play? Is it something that is more portal? Not everything is appropriate for a portal. In the same way that not everything is appropriate for a software house. So again, it's understanding that. Maybe having some kind of, whether it's a consultant or it might be somebody in your organization that's a little bit more technical au fait versus more business. But likewise, we've seen all shapes and sizes. We've had I've got a shiny idea, can you achieve it? And then we've also had 2,500 requirement spreadsheets that are, can you do these things? Thanks. There's nothing wrong with either side of that. I think if you go to the more kind of innovative startups, aspiring underwriters, or want to change the market type side of things, that tends to be that you've got to try and let them understand the complexities of some of those things, because they haven't got that maybe background in insurance. They don't have the product already built or a view of how they'll do that. They have an idea and let's make it happen. And you can spend as little as 5K on a little ancillary product, which is, who are you? What do you want? And that might be absolutely fine. But equally, you can quite easily go into millions developing something that is very, very comprehensive, does everything every which way, and is completely aligned to your operational processes and ongoing systems and integrations and everything else. So there isn't really a one size fits all. But I think the key thing from all of the various meetings and demos that we've done in the past, and obviously in my career when I've been involved in other things in larger organizations, it really is making sure that what is our goal as an organization, what are the requirements needed by the software company to do that, and do we have budget to do it day one? The whole keep it simple piece. It's not just small organizations that need to do that. That's an iterative approach, so you can make mistakes and you can correct them. But equally, do I need to have the 3 products day one? Could I have one? Do I need to have some of this reporting functionality? I want a suite of 1,500 reports. Well, you probably don't need those day one. Renewals, well, we've all been guilty of leaving them too late. But do we need to have those built day one? Well, not necessarily, but you don't also want to leave it till the last minute and then be in a panic stations moment when you've got to invite them. So again, it's just being pragmatic about it, getting help where you need it, and also letting the software vendor help you. We've all been there, done that. We can aid in that process and helping them. What do they need to provide? Well, we need some rating. So if you're an underwriter, you're going to be very au fait with, here's the product rating, here's a calculator I did yesterday at lunchtime. But what about the documents? What about the processes? What emails does it send out? Where does it send them? All that operational bit tends to get overlooked. So the operational department, it's just kind of, thrown over the fence and make it work. Why didn't it work? So it's bringing in all of those stakeholders to make sure that if you've got a system, now whether that's doing a pure quote and buy, that's absolutely fine. They can do that. But equally, the software packages out there have other functionality. They can be the operational center of your business. And they can talk to the software houses and integrate things into a single view. They might not. They may be completely separate, and that's absolutely fine too. So there is not every person on this call will have a view around, should it be segregated? Should it be the heart of the organization in terms of running it from a technology platform point of view? There isn't a right and a wrong answer. But what you do need to have at a strategy level is where are you going with it? What's your budget? And sometimes those things don't align. People want to do very shiny things and disrupt the market, but their budget really doesn't. It's not capable of achieving that. And it can, you'll get help with that.
Thanks for that. I think just to sort of finish off, Mike, we're just next slide, please. So briefly on this, we've talked about the software builds and the technology side, and we've hinted at building the sort of build it and they will come, not necessarily. So how, in terms of broker engagement, what steps did you go through on Laris? Was it kind of work out as you expected?
Yeah, I mean, the combination of leaning on the software houses, they've got their user lists. They will assist in terms of getting a message out there. It is a case though of doing the hard yards and making contacts and trying to win over, because some brokers believe that they're well served with what they've got at the moment, and that's fine. And we're happy to talk to them another day, but equally sort of give us a chance, and then these are the options. Oh, you're a specialist. Try this. Oh, actually, we quite like that. So it's not straightforward. It's not easy. But yeah, I mean, as it is always is the case, if you want something, you've got to work hard for it. And
did you have a hit list? Again, you've been in the market a while. You had a sense of who you were going to.
Absolutely. So there's a combination of knowing before you even think of the software houses who you would likely want to use. So that almost makes the decision for you to which software house to go to first. If you have to prioritize, you can't work on all of them at once unless you've got a lot of money and a very large team. So one drives the other. Then when you've got the product available, whether it be software house, whether it be on portal, is to actually contact those brokers and do what you've got to do, get them on board. The challenges for many is a lot of brokers are looking to reduce the size of their suppliers and panels in many instances. So the one thing though with going something that's not a standard offering is you might appeal to them. Ironically, because it is though, with all of the larger insurers with their IHP approaches, it's often some things that like the standard requirements that are there where they just want access to something simple. But yeah, there's a lot of hard yards in terms of making sure you get everyone on board. And again, the agency side, it's a little bit like like I say, use outside resource who've got the specialities, whether on compliance, regulation, things like that. And we did with the agency side, to speed up agency process, again, to make it convenient, to get people working with us. And once they're working with us, then, the proof is always in the pudding. So once we can, give them the opportunity to work with us and show them what we can do, then yes, it's in the vast majority, thankfully, touch wood of cases, it's been worthwhile in that regard, and we've seen the results. So.
We're coming up to the pips at 2:00, so just last slide. Just pennies worth on how things are going to look market landscape wise.
So I mean, the one thing that's always changing is buying habits, and the buying habits of the end user has got to be accounted for. So the digital world that we're moving more and more to, and the immediacy of getting quotations. So for us, it's as a wholesaler, particularly, we want to ensure that we can support the brokers, the intermediaries that are with system where we're supportive technology, that they can actually themselves offer that digitized solution to their potential end users, their customers. So I think it's like that is going to change. I think technology will change. Everything's instant. We all expect everything to be instant these days. The kids have never experienced that. Wait for your film to come back from Boots to see what the picture looked like. They are there immediately, and I think that's the way it is. So all the thinking has got to be around, how will technology change buying habits? How will buying habits perhaps even drive technology? So stay close to those in that technical world that are actually aware and take note of what they've got to say. Not that they want to take all terms, but they will react to the buying behavior of the end customer.
Thank you. I think we are at 2. I got one more slide, but I mean, it's just really a sign-off slide. I don't think we've actually got time to repeat that, but the things that we went through in terms of learning objectives at the beginning, I hope we've done some justice to there. Next slide. Yeah, if you want to know more about the Go-Insur team and what we've been doing with Laris and other clients in the specialty area, then very happy to speak, and we will share some of that information we promised mid-show. Back to Tim, I think. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, great session. Appreciated that. Very interesting. Yeah, just to close off, just to formally say thanks very much, Simon, Mike, and Steve, for a very engaging session. You can reach Simon at the contact details on that slide, or feel free to contact me at tim.richards@mgaa.co.uk with any questions or introductions, and I'll be happy to pass these on. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Don't forget to provide your feedback, and do look out for forthcoming MGAA events. Hope you all have a productive afternoon. Thanks again for joining us, and see you all soon.